So welcome to the first session of the morning on NCII, non-consensual sharing of intimate images. I'll start with some terminology discussion. So I'm very happy to have two pioneers next to me, left and right, and then great experts from Europol and Identifier to help me. So that's a new topic that we decided. Well, not so new. I mean, Sophie will tell us, definitely not new, and sewing as well for Korea. But something that we wanted to put on really top of the agenda for this second edition of the Trust and Safety Forum, just because it has reached a level of propagation and which tell us we have to do really something about this. This is why we discuss this. So four speakers. So I will introduce the two speakers once after the other so that you can remind. But in a sense, Sophie, who will start, is working for Stop NCII, which is a pioneering initiative in this field in Europe. Another pioneer is So-Young Park from the Korea Standards Commission, Communication Commission, the regulator of Korea. And thank you for coming this long way for us. And you will see So-Young speaking later this morning and tomorrow. On this session, we have a 2 hours session almost entirely dedicated on this, but then in more details, in more operational. That will be tomorrow, room 2.2, just downstairs, from 9:30 to 11:30. And then we have from Europol, representing law enforcement in Europe and the perspective from the law enforcement in Europe, and we'll conclude with Sigurdur Ragnarsson, CEO from Identifier, who will talk about how technology can improve the fight against this phenomenon. So first, the NCII, non-consensual sharing of intimate images, known as at the beginning as revenge porn. That was the first way to describe it. Then we realized that was not a way to characterize really the issue, because it was putting too much of a focus on the victim in a negative way. So then came NCII, and now building on the example or precedent of the Australian legislation, which described this type of abuse as intimate image-based abuse. There may be a new word which we still have to decide collectively whether we use this. In Korea, you call it digital sex crimes. So it may be IPSA for image-based sexual abuse, and it's important to characterize what this is abusive, and this is part of the sad family, if I could say, of online sexual violence, and it's important to characterize this by what it is. So thank you to my speakers to this. So what you're going to learn today is, okay, who are the two pioneers worldwide? I really want to insist on this. Also very important to keep in mind that there are initiatives dealing specifically with teenagers, so people under 18, and providing them support. Here on this session, we cover all of them, and we are going to, but maybe more specifically talk about the adults today. And tomorrow it will be more focused on the children. But for the regulators and for Stop NCI, I mean, you will also cover with partners all range, because I mean, there is no real difference between underage before 18 or over 18. But you will cover this more specifically. Okay, so I talk too much. So thank you for coming and being interested in this in this important topic. So I'll start with Sophie. So Sophie Martimer. Stop NCII, pioneering initiative in the UK. We are very happy that you could make the effort. You have a tons of experience. You know what you are talking about, and you know the people who are behind the screens and call you. So very proud to have you. So you will tell us more about what it is, what you do, and again, thank you, and proud to have a pioneer with us.
Thank you, Jean-Christophe, and thank you for having me here today. No.
Okay.
So it's really good to be here today. It's so important that we are having these conversations. So this is a great opportunity. So as Jean-Christophe said, I'm the manager of the Revenge Porn Helpline in the UK, and I also manage the Stop NCII platform, which is the world's first device-side hashing tool for adults to protect themselves from the sharing and resharing of intimate content. But why do we need it? So I'll give a bit of history. The Revenge Porn Helpline, and I will say, thank you for Jean-Christophe for mentioning language and terminology, which is really important in this space. We don't use the word revenge porn, notwithstanding the name of the helpline. That is the only time we use that phrase. Otherwise, we will talk about image-based sexual abuse or intimate image abuse. So it's really important that we have that conversation. So the Revenge Porn Helpline was established in 2015 alongside legislation in the UK that made it a criminal offence to share intimate images without consent with the intention to cause distress. And that 8 years, in some ways, that doesn't feel like a long time, but actually we have learned a lot. And what we have learned is that it can happen to anyone, any race, any sex, any gender, any orientation. And it doesn't happen in isolation. What we see is that the people who come to us are experiencing patterns of abuse, and that can be online and offline. What's really important is that we collaborate. The internet is a global tool, and we cannot fix this, the issues online, country by country. It's so important that we collaborate in sessions like the one that we're having today. We speak to other stakeholders within the UK and globally, and we learn from each other about the sorts of abuse. We share our knowledge about intimate image abuse, and we talk about domestic abuse, we talk about stalking, so that we can give the people that come to us the information, advice and support that they need, and that we can signpost them really effectively to appropriate support. So in our journey, we've had increasing numbers of cases. When the helpline opened, we were seeing 50 or 60 people a month coming to us for help. Through the pandemic, that hit over 400. And really, numbers have plateaued a little bit, but not actually that much. And we've had to find new ways of responding. Using new technologies, we developed a chatbot that we could support people out of hours, because 60% of people come to us evenings and weekends. So it's really important that we're responding in the ways and when people need that help. We've frankly seen an explosion of online abuse, and I often talk about an iceberg. The pandemic revealed so much more of what was there, but at the same time, it also prompted and created pressure cooker environments where abusive behaviours came to the fore. And we know that this disproportionately affects women and girls. Lost my thread. The majority of clients that come to us are female. Women have more images shared than men. In 2021, the average female client had 12.5 images shared, whereas the average male client had 0.2. They have more images, they are shared further, larger galleries, and shared on more and more platforms. So at the same time as the helpline being 8 years old, our legislation in the UK is also 8 years old. And many people felt that when it came into force, it was not quite what was needed. And I think that 8 years have proved that it is not fit for purpose. But in fairness to the UK government, they've accepted that. There's been a thorough review of the legislation, and we're looking forward to some really robust overhaul happening, hopefully later this year, with our online safety bill. And that's really important because that recognises the complicated behaviours that lie behind it, and it removes the need for anyone to provide proof of what a perpetrator's intention was, which was one of the major flaws. It will provide anonymity to victims going forward. So important. We know that it's a barrier to people coming forward to have to sit in open court with the potential that their identities could be revealed. So we're looking forward to some really significant change that has come out of really thoughtful consultation across the sector. We've also seen development of technologies, and to the fore of this is Stop NCII. It is, as I said, the world's first device-side global hashing tool. It's available to anybody in the world. It is open to other platforms. So it was launched with Facebook and Instagram as participating partners. But since then, we've added 4 other major platforms, including Reddit and OnlyFans. And we will continue to build that because nobody should have this content shared in this way. And the technology is available. And I think Ziggy will be covering more of this. That there are so many opportunities open to us to protect people. And all it really takes is for us, the goodwill to want to fix this problem, and collaboration is coming to events like this one. And there's been a major government initiative spearheaded by the states, the Global Partnership against Online Abuse and Harassment. There's a White House task force. Panorama Global in the States have developed an intimate image abuse initiative. And all of these things are bringing stakeholders together, partners, NGOs, regulators, academics, and legislators. And that these conversations are so important because this is genuinely a fixable problem. I have to believe that in my heart to get up every day. And it all starts here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. So the other pioneer in this field, and you mentioned Panorama Global. I wish Andrea Paul would be with us today. I mean, they're based in the US. It's an NGO, and they are building at the moment, a kind of a coalition or an alliance of survivors of IPSA, so image-based sexual abuse, and this is just ongoing. And I'm sure that we're either in Montreal at the FIC North America or here next year. She will be with us, and she's the kind of the glue between us. So the second, not in any order, the other pioneer in this field, and certainly the leading regulator on this topic, on this field, is I mean, Soyoung Park, but the Korea Communication Standards Commission, which is a regulator from Korea. Thank you for making the time. And I mean, thank you for what you have done. You will tell us about the specific issue in Korea, and you're in charge of international relationships, a member of INHOPE, and you prefer to, and you maybe I should not say, but you kind of prioritize this meeting to come and meet with the community rather than the very important next upcoming global meeting of the hotlines. So I will face some hard times when I go to INHOPE in April. But thank you for us, because it's important that you tell. I mean, it's not well known what you do, what Korea is doing, and you are the kind of the face of the commission internationally. So thank you for this, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. Hello, my name is Soyoung Park. I am, just like JC introduced me, I'm working as an international cooperation lead to combat NCII, targeting both minors and adults at KCSC. And thank you, Sophie, for sharing your experience and expertise. To build on Sophie's presentation and to briefly introduce the experience of Korea and KCSC. KCSC, Korea Communication Standards Commission, is an independent statutory that regulates media content in the Republic of Korea. We have been regulating online communications since our establishment in 2008 and have been dealing with NCII targeting both adults and minors for over a decade now. Next slide, please. NCII in Korea began as secret recording of women and girls in public bathroom stalls and changing rooms. However, the types and ways that people are victimized have evolved. As you can see on the slide, we not only see the typical type of NCII, which can be described as revenge porn or upskirting, but also we see a growing number of sextortion cases, non-imagery content such as posting links on social media to web pages where people can buy or download NCII, and deepfake content that disproportionately targets female celebrities, especially Korean pop stars. We also consider the release of any identifying information about a victim, such as their name and address, as well as vulgar language on their imagery, to be NCII. And the most recent trend we've observed is online sexual harassment and abuse of minors and their avatars in the metaverse. But above all, the most horrifying type of NCII that we see in Korea is online sextortion. And sextortion, as you know, the act of threatening to share nude or explicit images, is more common than you may think, and cases have increased exponentially during the pandemic. Next slide, please. So today, I want to introduce you an online sextortion case referred to as the L case in Korea. A 27-year-old man named Lee, known as L, operated 30 secret chat rooms on Telegram, where he threatened 9 underage girls and coercively produced 1,200 sexually exploitative images and videos from December 2020 to August 2022. This was an organized crime involving 15 other individuals. Thanks to the brave survivors and their help, the investigation could begin in Korea, and at the request of the Korean National Police Force, KCSC worked very closely with the police's investigation on the L case while monitoring for the evidence and providing the evidence we collected. So last November, thankfully, L was arrested at his home in Sydney, Australia, in a joint operation between the Korea and Australian police forces. So just like in the L case, we're seeing many more NCII cases becoming borderless crimes. Often the person responsible lives outside of Korea, making it very difficult to catch the offender without help from the other countries. The L case could be, and is a great example of how important it is for all of us to work together on an international level to deal with this crime. Next slide, please. So this diagram shows how KCSC works together with the relevant entities in Korea, including Korean National Police Agency and Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, and many victim support centers run by local governments. NCII is a big social issue in Korea, and we have many victim support centers that work closely with the survivors and request KCSC to assess the content and remove it. Next slide, please. So to help Koreans and to stop these crimes, we believe responding within 24 hours is critical. We have built a very sophisticated system to assess the content and decide on necessary corrective actions within 24 hours, and to prevent reproduction, recirculation, and re-victimization online. We've established a nonprofit hash database using hash technology developed by a Korean government agency. Next slide, please. So the database built with hashes of NCII collected by KCSC during the course of our review activities is created in collaboration with the relevant entities engaged in preventing the spread of such offensive content. Even though it is required by Korean law, sharing the hash list with internet companies in Korea and making sure they implement it within their system and service to stop uploading, storing, and sharing criminal images on their services and platform is a big step forward in our continuing effort to support survivors. So as you can see on the screen, as of 2022, our database holds 50,085 unique hashes, and this number includes NCII targeting minors. And we are committed to continuing our effort to address this issue, confident that through collaboration, we can put an end to this crime across the globe. Thank you for your attention, and let's work together to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Soyoung. And I would just emphasize that actually the reason we are here is on this topic is because of you, because you were the first to really kind of wake me, because wake-up call, it was applying to myself. I had a wake-up call in October, I think it was, or in September, when you reached out to me in another capacity. I'm a freelancer, so I have different roles. People ask me, who is this guy? What he's doing? Just because I have different clients, so once they see me as Cross-Industry Forum, another day as Identifier, another day as INCYBER, they get confused. But then that's helped me connect dots. And so when you reached out to me, it was because of the hotline, and we have the French hotline is here. If you want to raise your hand, guys. So the French hotline is here. And then you make me kind of rely then Andrea Powell from Panorama Global. Add another big layer of like education, and here we are. And then we reconnected with Sophie. So moving to Europol, we have Europol as the European law enforcement agency. They are not a regular law enforcement agency like you have at national level. You will probably explain. Jan is in charge of data protection at Europol. So it sounds like an oxymoron, but actually no, because it's a bit provocative. Because I think in Europe we have a very strong legal framework, rule of law, and this is why we trust, and we should trust the police in Europe, because they do operate under very strict scrutiny, which makes their job difficult, harder to investigate, but also put everybody in a safer situation. So thank you, Jan. And so you will talk about today about your specific issue of NCIS. So
Yeah, thank you very much, JC, and good morning also from my side to everyone here. My name is Jan Ellermann. I'm working as a senior specialist in Europol's data protection function, and I'm really happy to join this distinguished panel here to discuss NCII. I think it has been for many of us a niche topic, but things are changing to the better. So it enters the issue, let's say, enters mainstream. So for those of you who haven't seen this documentary here, The Most Hated Man on the Internet, I have, and basically it conveys quite impressively which kind of psychological harm victims experience basically if their intimate images are shared without their consent. And that is something which, by the way, is a data protection or privacy issue, evidently, probably one of the worst ones you could think about. At Europol, our main focus is on investigating child sexual abuse online. So that's a slightly different angle to it, maybe. And in our investigations, of course, we also have to work with a lot of personal data, and this is where my job comes into play, because the office I'm working for is basically supporting Europol's data protection officer in ensuring that everything which our colleagues from the operations department do is indeed compliant with applicable data protection rules. So you could say a bit provocatively maybe, not only victims of crime have a right to privacy, but even suspects and criminals have. And basically our role then is to ensure that the rules which we have at Europol to process personal data are also complied with in practice. But let's focus on the victims, because this is what is very close to our hearts. And in going after offenders, let's say, sometimes you need to be very creative, because investigations into child sexual abuse are very complicated. And that has a lot to do also with technology, because encryption is used. Offenders are active on the darknet, so it is pretty difficult to track them down in the real life. And we use a lot of creativity here to do our job. So one initiative which I briefly wanted to introduce to you here is something we call Trace an Object, Stop Child Abuse. So you can find this website on the Europol website. And what you see here are basically images which help our investigators to track down child abusers. So it might be something like a t-shirt or a tissue can or something. And we are trying to use the power of the crowd, let's say, to help us finding that little piece in the jigsaw which might assist us in furthering a very complicated investigation. So if we publish these kind of pictures online on the Trace an Object website, that is an indication that we are stuck. We don't have any other means anymore to go after the abusers, but with a bit of luck and with your keen eye for detail, it might be something like this tissue box here, I know has been sold in the supermarket chain whatsoever. And this chain is only active in, let's say, France or the Netherlands. And that may be the bit which allows us to dig deeper and finally have a success story. However, for me, it's also very important to get the message across that we are not just investing into investigations into child sexual abuse, but we are also investing into into prevention, basically. Because also from a data protection and privacy perspective, you could say the best measure you could ever have is to make sure that the crime doesn't even happen in the first place. And that has a lot to do with awareness and our kids being alert of the risks which are out there. So what you see here on the slide is basically us in the context of the EU Youth Day, where we invited kids from the European and international schools in The Hague to join us at Europol headquarters. So kids aged from 11 to 16, we split them into two groups. And we talked to them and we listened to them regarding their views on sharing of nudes. And here it's very interesting to understand, you know, all of us here in this room are from a different generation. This generation has been grown up with the internet and social media all over. So it's very interesting to hear their views on sharing nudes. And you potentially will be surprised that for roughly 40% of them, it's business as usual. They say, well, that's exploration of our sexuality. 10 to 15%, certain studies indicate, are actively doing it. And that is something which we at least also need to consider when we as adults, let's say, try to raise awareness. So it was, I have to say, I also learned a lot during this day. It was not an easy one because you really have to break the ice to even get views from the kids on that topic, because quite frankly, they find it awkward to talk about it. In particular to adults, they don't really want to talk about it. And then we had to be very, with very sensitive means, let's say, to say, look, this is an issue and things can turn bad. And this is the other thing which you see on the slide here. So we are running campaigns also at Europol to make youngsters more sensitive about what could happen. So for instance, grooming on the internet, they need to be aware that this can happen. And when we encourage them, if something weird happens to you, please report it to a person of trust, maybe your teacher, maybe your parents. Parents, of course, can be difficult because, as you know, a lot of this sexual abuse happens in close proximity of victims. But then please report it. We got interesting answers from their side because they said, well, you know, not too long ago, we had a case of a WhatsApp group where some of my peers were sharing funny images about teachers. And those were not nudes whatsoever, but they were, the teachers felt this is completely inappropriate and they accused us of violating their privacy. So why the heck should we now report something like nudes being shared in a WhatsApp that will only get us into trouble once again? And that for me was really also an eye-opener to say, okay, logically, if they feel they get into trouble because some silly pics about teachers were exchanged and then even the police marched in because that might be a criminal offense relating to violation of privacy of teachers, well, then we shouldn't be overly surprised if they're reluctant to report stuff if it gets really serious, right? The next slide, I put a warning here. So for those of you who are very sensitive, you might simply look out of the window or the other way now. But one issue we also face in law enforcement in the debate with, let's say, the privacy and data protection bubble is we are frequently accused of making efforts to establish something like an Orwellian surveillance society. And we then honestly say, this is not what we are interested in, this is not what we are doing, but we struggle to get the message across. And that, of course, also in this area also has a lot to do with issue of re-victimization. Of course, we cannot display the pictures which our colleagues are working on. But I spoke to the team basically at Europol, which deals with child sexual abuse. And I said, can you give me something to get the message across what it really is we are going after, to make very clear that we are not interested in the private lives of every Harry and Sally, but we are interested in this kind of stuff. And as you see, well, maybe you don't see too much in the last row, so I'm going to summarize it for you. But this is an entry from a woman who happens to be a mom, and she calls herself Pedo Mom. And on this pedophile board, let's say, she expresses in quite some shocking detail how much she enjoys abusing her own daughter, not only physically, but even more, she enjoys abusing her psychologically for things she has never done. And she would love to connect with others who have the same, let's say, kind of hobby. Of course, it's incredibly dangerous because law enforcement is out there and so on and so forth. But ladies and gentlemen, that is what is driving us. That is what is motivating us on a daily basis. And we are fighting in order to track down these kind of pedo moms and others who have these kind of sick habits. And that's my last slide. We are running into issues here because when you try to investigate crime related to child sexual abuse, you rely on technology. So the hashing we've heard about is, of course, important, but the hashing primarily helps you to identify whether you're looking at a case which has already been dealt with or is known to other police forces. But let's say the hash value is not known and you have a new case. Then, of course, you want to investigate that. And here, data retention is very important. And for those of you who are a bit familiar with the privacy and data protection bubble, you will understand why I put the Walking Dead here, because the data protection experts will tell you, well, hang on, data retention has been ruled down by the European Court of Justice so many times, so why are you coming up as law enforcement to debate this once again? You know it's not constitutional. Well, my response to that is this is wrong, because while the European Court of Justice indeed rightfully said general and indiscriminate data retention is evil, or to be more precise, is non-compliant with our fundamental rights, the court also elaborated on really interesting openings, because they said, if there's a case of a threat to national security, even general and indiscriminate data retention is constitutional, is possible, if it is strictly limited in time to what is necessary to address that situation. They also said general and indiscriminate data retention is possible as far as IP addresses is concerned. Personal identities can be kept, and there's something called a quick freeze, which is very controversial in the law enforcement domain because it practically doesn't work. But my plea here is we need a debate, including all of you, to exploit and explore the limits which are within the Constitution. Of course, nobody in law enforcement can have an interest to violate fundamental rights. Clearly not. But things which are possible according to rulings of the European Court of Justice should also be openly debated. That concludes my contribution. Thank you very much for your interest.
Thank you for this very powerful, notes, and I think you all see that people here are really they know their stuff, and they're really in contact with reality. So that's very very good for this topic and necessary. So thank you for this. I will quickly go over to Ziggy. So now switching to the technology. If we talk about technology, we mean if you're a victim and a survivor over time, then how do you, once your images are out there, then how do you get them, removed? And this is an ongoing task, and this is what the technology addresses. That's what Ziggy, CEO of Identifier, this is what you do. I would like to stress or highlight that you are another pioneer, because at the moment, and this is a call to the other tech companies in this room, Identifier is the only tech company who is invested in this new coalition that is being formed by Panorama Global. The reason why it's only you, it's because it's you, I suppose, but it's not because you're not invited. So come to me, come to Ziggy, come to Sophie, she's part of it, come to Soyoung, and then apply and say, okay, I have technology, I want to help. It's really open to you guys, but for the moment it's only Identifier. So tell us about how technology can help survivors here.
Okay, good morning. My name is Siggy Ragnarsson. I come from a software company called Identifier. And what we do is we have developed a technology to identify a known visual content. That is content that has been previously tagged as being potentially harmful, and to help limiting the distribution of this content. Now, being a technology guy, you would assume that we believe that technology can solve everything, but it can't. And technology can only solve a part of the problem. But at the same time, it can solve a very important part of the problem, that is limiting the distribution of this horrible content. And when you start thinking about this, you think about how can you do this? How can we use technology to stop this content? And we have seen through our work with various NGOs and law enforcement how effective technology can be in limiting the distribution of child abuse content, and we see no difference between this type of content and NCII. But for a successful way to limit the distribution of this content, you need several things. First of all, you need access to the content in some way. And for that purpose, we have those initiatives like Stop NCII, what KCSE is doing, NACMEC is, or National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has an initiative. Internet Watch Foundation is doing things as well. And so we're seeing multiple initiatives where victims are encouraged and helped in providing information about this content to create task lists to stop the distribution of the content. This is very important, but at the same time, because we have so many entities doing this, we have a challenge of potential data fragmentation. That is, multiple entities all have a piece of the puzzle, but nobody has the whole picture. So one of the key things to look into is collaboration. So these entities need to sit down, work together, and say, we need to have a way to allow the parties that want to stop this content to have access to all of this content from a single location. They don't have to go to multiple locations, ask for the hash list, they need to go to one location. So that is one thing. The second thing is the technology, or the hashing technology. We need to have an efficient way to be able to identify the content once it has been categorized. So we need to use the best and most advanced hashing technologies as possible to stop the distribution of the content. And the third challenge, of course, is users. Even if you have the best database, even if you have the best hashing technologies, if you don't have the users there, you have nothing. Right now, as Sophie pointed out, we have a number of big platforms that are utilizing Stop NCII, but so much more can be done. Think about all the small providers. If you are a small provider, you want to take part in this, what do you do? And that is one of the big problems. They don't have the knowledge, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have the funding, so they don't know what to do to stop this content. Do they go to Stop NCII, KCSC, NACMAC, and so on and so forth? Do they download the database? Do they maintain the databases? This is, if I were a small provider today, I would be just overwhelmed by the work involved. So we need to be able to provide those small platforms access to a simple and cost-efficient method to be able to check for the content that is uploaded on the platforms and flag and identify the potentially bad content, and to be able to report that content to the authorities in the respective countries. And this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to work with the platforms, work with law enforcement, work with the hotlines to build up a platform for simple identification of harmful content, not only NCII, also CSAM, hopefully terrorist-related content. So we have one single access point to access this potentially harmful content and find a way to identify it and stop the distribution of this content. Thank you.
Thank you, Ziggy. So we don't have much time for. I'll take maybe one or two questions if there's rooms. Reach out to the people after the session. Sophie, So-Young, Ziggy, you stay until tomorrow. Tomorrow we meet at 9:30, room 2.2, which is not larger than this one, on this topic with much more time. Do we have questions in the room? And then we have one there, just one, and then because we'll just take one question. Okay, so please.
Hi, yeah. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is India. I'm a survivor of a landmark case in the UK. I'm also here as a survivor member or lived experience consultant from the Panorama Global Coalition. And my question is really, hearing what I've just heard about the increasing number of cases, and also thinking about the sheer number of survivors who want to contribute to fixing this problem in some way or another, want to be activists, want to help, but also are not comfortable coming forward in a public manner. Would any of the panelists consider hiring survivors, whether in public-facing roles, such as with Europol, going into schools and talking to children, or just being that voice on the phone that when they initially call to report their case, an intermediary role, answering questions and fielding them into the services properly? Because it is just so hard to think about me trying to find a job when all I really want to do is fix this issue. Anyone?
So your poll is about how do you leverage survivors, and you want to take it?
Well, first of all, I would like to express my huge respect, because I think that's an expression of brevity and strength that you're standing up and telling your story. Probably my HR unit would give me a big stick on the head if I would offer you a job right now, simply because that's not my role. But I share with you, I'm absolutely convinced that we need to be vocal about the needs of victims, and your experience needs to guide us in finding solutions. So while I'm evidently not the man to give you a job, I would kindly invite you to join us for the Eden Conference, which is the Europol Data Protection Experts Network. And maybe we find a slot there basically to also get your view across to an audience which is dealing with that matter from a privacy angle, because I believe your experience to say, I want law enforcement and society to do something about it. And I'm fine with a potential impact this may have in terms of using technologies and so on and so forth, also on the right to privacy. That is something which we need to openly debate as a society. And we should not close our eyes and feel lucky because I was not a victim, JC was not a victim, and we are feeling well. We need to be conscious of the stuff people like you have been going through, I believe.
But I just think the children or survivors in general will be more responsive to someone who's been through it. They would be able to relate to them a lot easier. Seeing someone like you up on that stage, it would be easier to understand.
I think you're absolutely right, India, and I can sit here and speak to the thousands of people that have come to my service, but it's secondhand. And the reason why this is so important is because of the devastating impact that it has on those affected. It affects every part of their lives: personal relationships, family relationships, work, leaving the house. You know, all of these things become immensely challenging. And while I can report that, who better to illustrate it than somebody who's been there themselves? And I'm sure that we're going to have more conversations about work. We're not an activist organisation. We don't campaign, but we make our views known based on our knowledge. My first priority would always be for the well-being of my team and any survivor that worked with us. I'd have a lot of concerns about keeping that person safe, but I'd love to have those conversations because your voice will speak loudest.
Thank you. I will speak as Trust and Safety Forum. I think it's a chicken and egg situation. Like if we don't have people like you, like expressing interest and willingness to help, then no chance we're going to give a voice, and then no chance that there is a chance that people know. So, guys, if you look for people, if you run a hotline or a hotline, then you may have an interesting person here and friends. No, that's the and so that let's discuss also with FIC North America what we can do for the community. Guys, with this, so see you tomorrow, 9:30, room 2.2, and feel free to reach out to our valued speakers today. Thank you, guys. Thank you, people.